Good luck to you. This is one of the harder things that I often have to say and think in my head. And it's often a corollary with it's not my problem. And what often happens, and whether you are in some sort of role where you're an advice giver, right? So it doesn't matter what particular advice giver you are, whether you're a parent, an educator, a colleague, a friend. And the only thing that you can possibly do often is if somebody comes to you, you give your advice, you give your thoughts, and then if it doesn't sort of sink in or if somebody doesn't see it, there's nothing you can possibly do. You simply just have to say, good luck to you. And I think about that all the time. I wish I could sort of have more influence. Everybody wishes that they can have more influence. So everybody, like something that you say sort of sticks. But it's one of the more challenging things, particularly as a parent, um, is how do you get people to sort of believe? How do you get your kids or other people that you're sort of telling things to believe? And ultimately you can't, right? Like that at the end of the day you can't, and there's nothing that you can sort of say that's going to change somebody's mind. They have to decide to want to do it and think in their head that I actually want to um, be part of this particular thing, right? And I greatly recognize that everybody's got different brain chemistries. Everybody grows up differently. They all have sort of different things, and so that's an important thing to sort of as a caveat is really think about, like, how is it that all of these things are sort of fitting in. I often think about those, but then after that, then you have to say, because you can't, like, sort of medicate for absolutely everything, right? Like, eventually life kicks in, and that's just part of who you are. And then you have to sort of think about, well, you sort of have your say and you try to do your thing, but if nobody wants to listen, usually, I'll mutter to myself after, and everybody, all my both my kids know anyways now. It's like nobody, I always say nobody wants to listen to dad anyways after. Um, but it's the truth, right? Like, there's only so many times that you can say something, and it's often, it's painful for me. I sort of see goofy things, like, maybe somebody is holding a knife the wrong way, or, maybe as somebody's going out into the cold and not wearing a coat, and you say, well, maybe you should wear a coat. I'd recommend it. And then they don't do that. Well, then, it's on them, right? Like, if anything was to happen, and that's where I think, like, that's an important thing. So me as an educator, I have to sort of abide by that all the time. There's nothing I can ultimately do to, it is nice to have increased influence and all that kind of stuff where you can say something and somebody's going to listen, but ultimately there's nothing that you can do until those people are willing to come to you and sort of want to take lessons from you. So this is where I sort of think about, often it's very easy to blame the teacher for everything that goes wrong. It's very easy to blame other people that goes wrong in terms of what's going on. I do that too. I have a tendency to do that too. Um, But then we got to take a step back and say, okay, if even when we have, maybe it's a teacher we can't understand, they have a foreign accent, or I can't relate to them because they're so much more younger or older, and they don't have any credibility because they're too young. Um, even if all those things, you take a step back, and you think, how can I actually listen or think about what they're actually saying? What are they trying to communicate? What is the lesson that they're trying to say? ultimately that is on the learner, and it's a big part of the puzzle, right? It's not necessarily the always the educator that has to be, or the advisor or the mentor that has to do something. It's really on the learner often, where you have to take it into consideration, and that's where you take it into consideration. And how much you take it into consideration really depends on you and what you're going through. And I do realize that there is a lot that goes on. And you might get more than one sort of thoughtful thing to think about from multiple people. But ultimately, the responsibility ends up being on the person that's sort of thinking through this. So the things that I typically say are really boring. There's nothing that is new to what I'll ever say, right? Like it's pretty ordinary things. Financial wise, get insurance. If you need life insurance, you don't always need when you don't have dependents. Um, start doing investing, take 10 to 15, 20%, some sort of number like that. Maybe it's 15% of everything that you make, invest it in long-term index funds and in mutual funds. Um, looking at, just your life, just expect things to take decades rather than in the moment. Like all these things are really simple. There's really no magic. If you start looking at it, there is no magic. There is nothing across the board that, there's all these sort of tricks, and people might think that there's all these kind of tricks, but ultimately it's not. Um, and you might not want to know all of those tricks too, because that takes away from your life, right? Like there's a lot to do. Um, and so, I choose to simplify my life and do things that are very simple, and sort of look at the long run trends and think about, okay, these things are always going to take a lot longer, and I think they will. I'm not going to sort of get there today, but I certainly know the way to get there over the course of several decades to actually get to some place, and I'm going to continue to do those things. So, if you say that stuff, it's not exciting. Nothing about it is going to make your eyes dilate and give you that rush of adrenaline. In fact, the way that I'm saying it is really boring. But all of that stuff, right? If you don't choose to go by those things, and you choose to do something that is more risky, you choose to do something that you just simply just don't care, then it's good luck to you. Then it's at that moment you have to figure out, is this, as that's ultimately on the person that wishes to execute on that. And there's nothing you could do, right, as the sort of on the educator side, other than just say good luck to you. And ultimately, I wish there was more, but you can't. And so you just wish them well, and then you continue on your very way. And that's it. And I'm learning to do this. I do have a lot of, I do get a lot of emotions when I go through it. And I learn from this because it's ultimately I see people doing foolish things, but wearing coats outside when it's really cold, when they should be, or wearing no coats outside when it's really cold, or carrying a knife sillily in a weird way. All of those kind of things, that's a lesson learned. And sometimes it just takes people longer to learn those lessons than just simply hearing it from somebody else. So that's where you just simply have to say, good luck to you.